Barely reach it. Okay. It's about time to get started. There's dill for the taking in the back if you love dill. Fresh dill from the garden back there. Someone gifted us with wonderful squash and zucchinis. Those are already gone. So several others, if you've got overload with those, some of us that don't have a garden love them. So you can always bring them, put them on the back table, and people will take them. There is the political, I can't remember what it is, the page back there on the table again about the law that they want to pass and that allows the government to take children who want to do a gender change and hide them away from their parents, not tell their parents and keep them from their parents through the whole process, which at minors, okay, underage children.
Oh my God.
And that's already been passed. My understanding is it's already been passed House and Senate, but this is a poll to reject it by the people, to get it on the ballot so it can be rejected. And if you want to sign that back there before you go, it was here before, some of you got it signed, some of you, we ran out of space, so there's another one back there just for today. So if you didn't get a chance to sign it, you can do that if you would like.
How many of the existing laws does that violate?
It should be a lot, but that's not how some people see it. Anyways, we're not going to get ourselves caught up in politics. I'm just saying it's there. And the other thing is, we want to go to prayer this morning. I happen to know we need to pray for Debbie. Sweet Debbie is getting her knee surgery today. So we're going to be praying for her. And I know there's several others having things done. So we'll just pray that God is with everybody that's in a medical situation today. How's that?
Is he in Moses' life or Wenatchee?
So there you have it. So, you know what? We're with her in prayer, right? So that's how we will do that. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for a beautiful day. Chance to be together to study your word again, be challenged and changed by it. And we also just ask that you would be with Debbie even now as she is in surgery today, that everything goes smoothly, and most of all, that recovery goes very well, and that she gets solid recovery for that need. We pray for others who may have a physical need today, whether they're here or whether they're still at home or someplace else. Father, that you would just be with folks also as their traveling months are here for vacationing. Keep our people safe. And today, just open our hearts. We come to the word ready to be challenged, to be changed, to learn more about you, and to be encouraged by you. So do that, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Chapter 5, 2 Kings. Chapter 5, 2 Kings. We have been reading about some of these things, and today is just an awesome story. I know I've chatted with a few folks, and some of you have some exciting things in your lives, challenges as far as sharing your faith, doing other things. And today, you know, I always say it's not by chance. It's always God's plan. It's exactly the lessons we need to hear on the days we need to hear it. And so chapter 5 is one of those great, great lessons for us. I call it powerful influence. Now, there are a lot of people in this room who could look at me and go, I don't think I have very powerful influence. I'm just this, or I'm this age, or I can't do this, or I'm only this, and I can't be like, and I can't. It's all those things. And to be honest, the truth is, this story is about an amazing spot where God just put the right person, the least likely person, in the right spot at the right time. And I always call those, in our household, they're divine appointments. I don't set them, I don't make them, but God arranges them. And this is what happens in this powerful story. So chapter 5 of 2 Kings, verse 1. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. So we talk about this leprosy thing again. Whatever kind of skin disease, it made him kind of one of those, like, should have been outside the city claiming unclean. But that was in a different setting because the king of Aram, and remember we used that term Aram, we said another word for it would be Syria. So that's what we're talking about here. So this isn't Israel, this isn't God's people, this is Syrian. So it's another nation. And how had God gave them victory even over his people in a form of discipline? Remember, because of them not following God, Aram, Syria had victory over God's people. So this is this like, we would kind of say like the other guys had commander of their army. And so here he is, Naaman, but he had leprosy. So this is kind of a difficult situation to be in. How would you command all your troops and still have leprosy? And how bad he had it or what, I don't know, other than it was enough that everyone knew he had it. So, verse 2, chapter 5, 2 Kings. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. When you would go raiding parties into other countries, so from Syria, Aram, we would go out, raid into the nearby areas. It was into Israel, remember, northern kingdom, not Judah, southern, but the divided kingdoms, and go into Israel. They pick up this little girl and her family, they're taken captive. Well, you take the kids and put them to work. They become slave workers. And so they took this girl, and thankfully she's at least not like, they wouldn't have taken a girl for the fields, but she would be like a house girl. So she would go around and dust and clean and mop and, you know, take care of things and work around in the household. And so here is this great general, and his wife gets a helper girl from the last raid that he did. So he brings home this girl. She's a nice girl. Have her go to work. But she's a girl. She's just a girl. She said to her mistress, this girl, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. Now think about it. These are powerful people. The general and his wife would have been kind of some of the leading people of the whole community. And wealthy enough to have little slave girls working around the house. And here's this whole situation, and this little slave girl that you brought from Israel says, oh, if he would just go, he could get healed. Well, two things would be happening, wouldn't they? One is, culturally, would you believe an enemy slave girl? Would you take her word for it and what she says? And the other, and she's just a girl. She's just a kid. See, that's why I love this story. She's just a kid. But she speaks up for her faith, and she had great faith that he would be healed. So she had a faith. And what I love is she had a great faith still in what God could do and his people, in spite of being taken captive away from her home and family and made a slave. She couldn't have said, well, see, sometimes when things don't go right for us, we're pretty quick to say like, well, there you go. See, God didn't help at all. She could have said, well, God let me be taken captive and taken from my family, my homeland, and be a slave in these people's houses. But what does she do? She speaks up for her God and still has this amazing influence to take place. Ooh, I love this story. Okay. Verse 4. Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. Okay, here's the next step of the story. Now, you're the commander-in-chief of the whole army, and you go to your president and tell him, you know, this little slave girl told me this. What does that tell me? It tells me that he was desperate. That he would listen to a little slave girl from another nation who would give him maybe hope, because he was feeling pretty hopeless in spite of all of his wealth, his power, his position. He still needed God. He needed an answer. He needed to be healed. So he goes and tells him, verse 5, this is, the king replies, by all means go, the king of Aram replied, I will send a letter to the king of Israel. This shows me what great respect the king had for this guy. One, that he would say go and let him go instead of keeping him there on the job. And two, that he would write a letter to the king of Israel on his behalf. He's speaking up for him. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents. That's about 750 pounds of silver, 6,000 shekels, about 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. Does it not tell you the level of his wealth? Okay, that he can take this with him. Verse 6, the letter that he took to the king of Israel said this. So it's kind of like the story opens up and let us read the letter that he wrote. It says, with this letter, I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy. Okay, do you see how scary this would be? The king of Israel is going to get a letter from the king of Syria. And the Syrian king says, hey, I'm sending you my top guy so you get him healed. Dun, dun, dun. Like, the king gets a letter like, what? Who am I? I'm just sitting here. And you sent this letter and your top commander of your army that's been raiding my nation and stealing my people for slaves. And you want me to cure him of leprosy. So it's no surprise at verse 7, as soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me? He thinks, you see, this is like a jab, a little poke at me, and he's going to have this expectation that I can cure some of the leprosy, and if I don't cure his commander, then they'll come and, raid our whole country. This is not fair, and he's freaking out. And the whole thing was started by the little slave girl who just said, I know someone who has a connection with God who can bring a cure for him.
What amazing parents she had to pass all that information
into this little girl who's now a slave girl. Yeah. Verse 8. When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, a sign of great distress, of mourning, of fear, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger out to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. He didn't even go out and speak to him face to face. The commander is like, excuse me? You send a servant out to talk to me? You can't get up off your chair, come out here and talk to me. I'm the commander of the entire army of Syria. I mean, this would have been so rude and so like a slap in the face, like you don't even care enough. Because he should have come running out, gushing, like, you've come to see me. And he didn't get that reaction. And so he's like not very happy. And so here he is. And then it tells him, just, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan. Where's the Jordan? The Jordan is a dividing water. It's for Israel, not in Syria. So verse 11, but Naaman went away angry. And he said, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Why? Because we all want personal treatment and we want it right now. We're that way. Imagine a commander who is just flat out wealthy, rich as rich can be, and powerful. And this is what he's getting. Verse 12. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? And couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. So this would have been humiliating and strange. And it's like, you want me to go in your water? We've got better water than yours anyway. And, this whole situation is just wrong. Verse 13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father. Now that's a very respectful, like Like we're just children in front of you. We know, O powerful one. They're coming, the servants saying that. My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Oh my goodness. You see, sometimes we expect God to do something so, like, if I'm going to serve God, it's got to be great and gigantic and it's incredible and like the level of Billy Graham. Or I'm nothing. And the story is written this way exactly so we capture who is the hero. The little slave girl who just spoke out and said, hey, why don't you just go and get healed? I feel bad for you. Even though you're my slave master, I still feel for you. I care about you. Someone who she could have said, well, let him suffer. But her attitude stayed right. Her heart stayed right. It's kind of like working for that boss. For some, it's kind of like living with that spouse. For some, it's like being by that neighbor. You see, there's always going to be those people in our lives, and the option is stay like the little slave girl. What's her name? We'll never know her name. Well, this side of heaven. She doesn't even get credit with her name in the Bible. And in the end, she's the one who started this whole thing, who got the ball rolling, who spoke up for her faith. Because it continues, because what's amazing is there's going to be an influence that goes clear into Syria because a little girl just spoke up, kept a tender heart, didn't get bitter, simply spoke out her faith in a simple way, in one of those divine appointments in a moment when she could. And she's the hero of the whole story. Not the rich commander, not even the great prophet from God. No, it was the little girl who simply just spoke up. That's why I love this story so much. Then Naaman, verse 15, and all his attendants, they went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel, so please accept a gift from your servant. Wow. He comes back, the great and mighty commander, and comes in humility before this prophet and says, there is, I believe, there is one God and only one God, and he's your God here. And it's like this whole thing of like this foreign commander coming back and having faith in the one true God. Verse 16, the prophet answered, as surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing. And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. You see, it wasn't about buying God's gift of healing. It wasn't about using your riches to get an answer. Because the prophet also knew this is a powerful man, a wealthy man, and none of that mattered, did it, when he had leprosy. Only God and God's work in him did this. And so he wants to give him all these gifts and says, no. It can't be bought. You're not going to go back and say, well, you know, I gave him like 150 pounds of silver or gold or whatever. No. He did it for nothing. So he gets ready to send him on his way. Verse 17. If you will not, said Naaman, if you won't take these gifts from me, please let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry. For your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to any other god but the Lord. Any other little g god, false god, but the Lord. Capital L, the Lord we know. Verse 18. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. Oh, by the way, a little disclaimer. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow down, and he is leaning on my arm, and I have to bow there also. When I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. It's just part of my job. Okay, so it's just part of my job. So I want everyone to understand that up front. He's kind of making this whole disclaimer. Rimmon was a false god that was often out of the Syrian country, and they would worship him in special ways, bowing before him. Some people say it could have been a slight shift, also like Raman. I don't mean the microwave. That was the god of thunder, and Zechariah chapter 12 talks about that one. I think most scholars agree that it was probably Raman, the god of thunder that they worshipped in Syria, but they changed it in the story because they didn't want to give it honor. So it would have been, Rimmon means pomegranate, and it's doubtful that they bowed before pomegranate. But for whatever reason, a lot of times the old scribes or writers wouldn't give him honor by putting the false god's real name in here. So that's probably what it was. Whether or not it was, it's just a false god. So, verse 19, so go in peace, Elisha said. In other words, I get what you have to do for your job. I get that you're going to have to help walk him into that false temple and help hold his arm while he gets down, the king, and then gets back up and causes you to bow to that false god too. But you're not doing it in your heart. You're just helping him as your job. But he wants this plot of ground to take, this little amount of dirt. He wants to take that with so he can know that that came from God's country, God's place, and he can kneel on that in his own privacy and have his own place to pray to the real God that he now knows. All of that started by a little girl. After Naaman had traveled some distance, verse 20, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha. Remember Gehazi? That's Elisha's little servant guy. The man of God. He said to himself, my master was too easy on Naaman, this Aramean, by not accepting from him what he brought. And as surely as the Lord lives, I'll run after him and get something from him. You know, it was written that way. Why? So that we would think he was doing this for his master. Don't be fooled. Has nothing. Oh, it's kind of like someone that does something and they say, oh, yeah, I'm doing it, you know, for the church. But really it's all about the fact that they want to get a client. And if the client thinks they're doing stuff for the church, you know, that kind of a thing. So that's what's really going on here. So Gehazi, verse 21, hurried after Naaman. When Naaman saw him running toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him. Is everything all right? He asked. Everything is all right, Gehazi answered. My master sent me to say. And that's where I want to always stop and go, what? You know what I'm going to say. Liar, liar, pants on fire. My master sent me to say, 2 young men from the company of the prophets have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent, about 70 to 75 pounds of silver, and 2 sets of clothing. There's no young men coming. He wouldn't go get money and clothing for them to help these guys. He's made up this whole story so it just sounds so right. And it's just a big lie. Verse 23. Oh, by all means, take 2 talents, said Naaman. He urged Gehazi to accept them, and then tied up the 2 talents of silver into 2 bags and 2 sets of clothing, and he gave them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them ahead of Gehazi. So now he says, okay, my servants, here's these 2 bags of money. Here's these 2 sets of clothes. You just trot along with this guy and take him back there for him. So Gehazi's zooming back home. Of course, I got to do this and make sure that Elisha doesn't see me. But I'll run back home with this stuff, put it away. I got 2 great sets of clothes. I got 2 bags full of money. And these dudes are carrying it for me. I don't even have to lift a finger. So he just trots on back home with this stuff, Verse 24, when Gehazi came to the hill, he took the things from the servants and put them away in the house, and he sent the men away, and they left. Here, no need for you to go on down. Here, let me just take those for you. I'll just pile them up and I'll just trot them on down to the house. You go back to your master. And he sends the guys back to Naaman. If you ever feel like you need to do something in secret, it's probably wrong. Just saying. He felt he had to keep the secret. Don't tell Elisha. He had to take the clothes and the money and sneak it into the house. Don't tell Elisha. Have this little secret going. I'm the only one that'll know. And that guy, he's gone and he's wealthy and it doesn't matter to him and he doesn't even care. He won't even miss that money or clothes. It's no problem. He already offered it. Could have just been taken free. And for some reason Elisha wouldn't take it. Like, what is with all that? So I'll just take it in secret. It's probably wrong. Verse 25. When he went in and stood before his master, so I just picture him like hiding the clothes, hiding the bags of money, and then he walks into Elisha, just walks on in, and he says, verse 25, when he went in and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, where have you been, Gehazi? Dun, dun, dun. It's like, where have you been? And he's like, your servant didn't go anywhere, Gehazi answered. What happens? When you lie, you have to what? Lie again. Your lies always have to be followed by lies to cover up the lies for the lies. It just never... I learned that pretty much as a kid. I just was not a good liar. And if you try to lie, you end up having to try to cover it up with a lie, and it just gets worse, and the punishment just gets worse. I'm just saying, from experience. Verse 26, but Elisha said to him, was not my spirit... Now notice this is not, he's not saying the Holy Spirit. He's saying, was not my spirit, little s, was not my spirit with you when the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to take money or to accept clothes or olive groves and vineyards or flocks and herds or male and female slaves? All the things that guy would take from his enemies. You'd be willing, is this the time for you to go and get that? Are you acting the same way as an enemy would? It's kind of like that. How do mothers have eyes in the backs of their heads? How do they know these things? Well, Elisha knows because the Lord lets him know these things. But he's like, he even names out this thing. Then comes, dun, 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 the punishment. Because verse 27, Naaman's leprosy will cling to you and to your descendants forever. Then Gehazi went from Elisha's presence, and his skin was leprous, and it became as white as snow. What's the irony? He gets the leprosy, but this whole thing started over for God to do a healing. And instead, he takes the leprosy. And his extended family gets it. Thanks a lot, Dad, Grandpa, whatever. Now this goes on through the families. What a sharp... Throughout the Old Testament, you're often going to read passages like I call these little stories, the little moments, these vignettes where you come in and read about. And quite often they're built on the same premise, and that is contrast. So that readers, like for centuries, like into 2023, will read this and see the contrast. What are the contrasts? Little servant girl, rich, powerful commander of the army. Contrast. Who had truth? Who knew the real God? It's contrast. Here is Elisha simply being a channel to serve God, bring the healing statement, in spite of the fact that Elisha wouldn't even come out and speak to him, and he got all ticked because he wouldn't, Naaman did. And the contrast of who had the power? Who had the power to heal the leprosy? Elijah. But Naaman and all of his money and power didn't. Even though the world would see his power as being the powerful one, not the poor old man of God. Contrast. Then you see Elisha graciously saying, all of this is a gift from God, and all of this happens from God, and I'm just a humble servant in the middle. It's not about me at all. And Gehazi, the servant, who should have been humbly serving his master, goes after the wealth. And in that contrast, in the end, it turns around to bite him. Okay, he gets the leprosy. So there's all these contrasts. So a lot of times Bible stories, when you read them, you don't just read straight through and get the story. It's a good story. But you start seeing these contrasts. And then you start seeing in our world today, where does it look like the power is? But who's really got the power? Where does it look like, you know what I'm saying? These contrasts that happen. And for us, who do we think is incredibly powerful and mighty people of God? When sometimes the little kid will say the thing that most changes a heart. So we can't, God uses all kinds of things, and lots of times he uses contrasts that just kind of surprise us. Because we look at things one way, and God looks at things totally different. Does that make sense? Okay, chapter 6, let's jump in. The company of the prophets said to Elisha. Now remember what I said about these company of prophets. Usually, a lot of times, there'd be oftentimes about 50 in a company. Remember when Elijah hid companies of prophets in the caves from Jezebel? And there'd be about 50 in this cave or 100 here or whatever. He would have these companies of prophets. So they would gather together, read scriptures together, copy, because everything had to be handwritten and copied. So any of those things, they would work together in these little prophet schools. And so that's what they're talking about, this company of the prophets. So the company of the prophets said to Elisha, look, the place where we meet with you is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan where each of us can get a pole, and let us build a place there for us to meet. And he said, go. Then one of them said, won't you please come with your servants? I will, Elisha replied, and he went with them. They went to the Jordan and began to cut down trees. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. Oh no, my lord, he cried out. It was borrowed. Huge value in that axe head. At that time, tools were made from bronze most of the time. An iron axe head would have been extremely expensive. Obviously much more effective. If you've ever tried to work with bronze, bronze dents and bends and is more flexible. It's less powerful as a tool, but an axe head chopping a tree, if you got an iron one, they would be very hard to get, very valuable. This is huge. This is a big problem. So verse 6, the man of God asked, well, where did it fall? When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there and made the iron float. Lift it out, he said, and then the man reached out his hand and took it. Do you realize this is stunning? I love to do like scientific experiments. I'm here to tell you, you throw an iron axe head deep in the middle of Moses Lake, and then you just cut down the stick and toss the stick out there and have the axe head float back up, jump on the stick, and pick it up. It doesn't happen every day. Okay? These are miraculous things. These are things like, and what is he doing? He's just showing over and over again, God does miraculous things. And what a perfect little, Elisha's my hero here in the moment, because a perfect object lesson for his little disciples, his followers in the company. And all these young bucks are going like, yeah, you talk about a mighty God. Elisha had watched Elijah do things and seen miraculous things. Now here's this thing, and I'm not recommending you throw an axe head in Moses Lake and a stick and try to make it come back up. I don't know that God would do that again, but I'm just saying, what a shocker it would have been to watch that. To watch that happen. We all understand it's impossible. Physically impossible for that to happen. But we serve a God who does things that are impossible. And these are things we come away from encouraged when you read the scripture and go, well, I may not have an accident, but I may have a doctor's word that says this can never be cured. And watch God bring cure.
Can I tell you about a miracle that our church was talking about?
Yeah.
Our pastor's brother-in-law was brain dead, totally brain dead. Remember?
Pastor's brother-in-law totally brain dead at their church.
Well, not our church, but
Oh.
pastors. But anyway, they'd taken the tube out finally. The wife finally gave permission. He coughed and woke up and said, "Where am I?" That is a total miracle.
So I don't know if all of you heard that way back there. Took the tube out, declared brain dead, absolutely brain dead, no signals on all the fancy machines. Took the wife agreed, time to take the tube out, and he coughed once and was totally awake and said, "Where am I? What's going on?"
My husband did that back in Texas a long time ago.
So God still does things that are impossible. To him, that's no different than having an axe head float up and jump on a stick. So we serve an amazing God, and when you read these things, you may not have the axe head issue, but you may have something else. You may even have a relative or a grandkid or somebody that's way off track and it looks impossible. We serve a God who does the impossible, right? So I hope that these, when we go through these, it's not like, well, that's just a really cool story. It's like, whoa, I'm in a personal relationship with the God who does the impossible. That's pretty incredible. That makes me excited. Okay, verse 8. Now the king of Aram, Syria, was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, "I will set up my camp in such and such a way, in such and such a place." The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, "Beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there." So the king of Israel checked out the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on guard in such places. So every time this king would go to make a move, in his secret chambers, he would be saying like, "Okay, let's set up over here at point C." Elisha comes, tells the king of Israel, "Don't go near point C. Better send a spy over there. You'll see he's setting up a camp there with his soldiers." They'd run, check it out, sure enough. So they would go over this way. And every time this just kept happening. Verse 11, this enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and he demanded of them, "Tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel?" In other words, in today's movies, we would say, we've got a mole. There's somebody telling, there's a snitch. There's somebody, a traitor amongst us, that's telling the king of Israel where we're at and where we're setting up our operations. And they would get up, he was beside himself. We got to figure out who the traitor is. Verse 12. "None of us, my lord the king," said one of his officers, "but Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom." Trust me, Elisha was never in his bedroom. Nor were there listening devices in those days to have that. Who was telling him? God was telling him. And they just don't understand that. Verse 13, "Go find out where he is," the king ordered, "so I can send men and capture him." The report came back, "He's in Dothan." Now that would be kind of like the central highland part of Israel. It's only mentioned a little bit here. It happens to be the town and area where Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. That was Dothan, that area, back in Genesis chapter 37. So this place is his, and they're saying that's where he is. So verse 14. "So then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there, and they went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. 'Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?' the servant asked." Okay, so is this Gehazi? Maybe. Remember, he's got this leprosy issue now, so we're not real sure if it's him, but on the other hand, chapter 8, it comes back up again, so more than likely it's Gehazi again, or another one of the servants. Verse 16, "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Key line. If you're an underliner, that's one of those sentences you want to underline. Those who are with us are more than those who are with him. Why do I say that? Because God's unseen army is always at our call. You realize that? He can marshal forces on your behalf beyond anything you can see or think of. ever told you guys, but I was driving down a steep hillside in Costa Rica. I had a passenger with me, a nurse. Did I already tell this? Driving down the hill. And all of a sudden I hit, like, it would be like an oil spill, but actually it had been an accident. And they're not very good about cleaning up after accidents. So I hit broken glass and spilled oil and stuff from a car wreck on this steep hill. And you know there's no guardrails. Well, they don't, it's just, you're coming down this, we're talking steep curved hill. It was like switchback coming down this huge hillside. And my car just flew straight ahead. It's night. I remember my headlights clearly just like whoosh, straight off the hill. Just going. It's kind of like every time my heart pounds a little bit when you go to Wenatchee and you make that one turn and the water's down there and you just go like, if you just, and so, but there's no guardrails and my car just, the steering was gone. I just hit that and went straight off the cliff. And my car went straight down like that, my headlights, and all of a sudden, now I'm in my car facing straight down. This is a steep cliff. I'm hanging in the car on the side of a hill. So here's my car hanging off the cliff like this. So we're just sitting there. It's kind of just sitting there. So the gal next to me, well, we're just like, you know, it's that moment when you're just like, what do you do? And I tell her, you get out first. Because if getting out was going to cause the car to go down, I didn't want her to go. I'd go with the car. So she opens the door, and the side, you know, this way, because we're facing this way. So she pries open the door, and she crawls out, and then lets the door go, and I'm like, okay, the car settles down. I'm still facing like this in my seatbelt. So we had to get out. I undo my seatbelt, pull the car door up like this, crawl out, and get on the hillside. Now I'm in a dress and heels. It had been at a fancy dinner, thanking a group of people that had come and helped us with a missions project overseas. So I climb up now, and you're just hanging on to any clumps of grass and stuff. And I look over at my car, and it's just hanging on this hillside like this. I'm waiting for it to go any second. We get up to the top. We get a hold of someone. They call the neighbors that see what happened, and they see this car hanging over and these, you know, two white women climbing up the hillside. And so the police show up and a tow truck guy. So the tow truck guy comes out and he starts screaming hysterically. He's screaming in Spanish. He is beside himself. Because he looked at my car, he crawls down with a chain. He crawls down beside my car and he doesn't want to get near it because he's screaming now because he said, there's nothing, it has to be angels. Because there's nothing holding your car from going down. It's a cliff. And he can see there was absolutely nothing. My car is sitting literally at this angle straight off the cliff. Why didn't it go down? He goes, he just is screaming. He was just screaming, angels, 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 angels. And he finally reaches under the car and attaches the steel, the chain thing and the big hook. And they start cranking from the top. Pull my car onto the road. I walk over. And what had happened, it had done one full spin as well, by the way, because in the front, the little line that comes from the power pole, you know, that one guard wire thing, it hit that on the front and spun me around. And so in the front of my car, there's a little dent right here from that wire. I get in, start the car up, see ya, and drove home. Now the people are still screaming. The guy goes over, and the policeman's there writing a report. The policeman took the piece of paper, tore it up, and he goes, I can't even turn this report in because no one will believe me. He goes, but I know that you shouldn't even be alive, nor should that car be drivable and on the road and you driving home. He was freaked out. So they were all screaming and caused this big scene. Because greater are those who are with us than the others. You see that passage? It showed me then in my life, there are times when, you know, again, no frilly thing, but I'm talking hefty angel was holding my car right on the side of that hill until we got out. We got the car pulled back up on the road and could drive it home and continue to do ministry. I can't explain any other way, because I looked under there. There's nothing. It wasn't like it was caught on a branch or a rock. We're talking straight, smooth grass. Grassy hillside. So when I look at this, I'm not at all surprised. Verse 16, don't be afraid. The prophet answered, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so he may see. I only wish, you know, you're a little shook up. I just wish later I would have said, like, open my eyes, God, so I could see those angels holding that car right on that hillside for me. I didn't, but I still know he did. And I know they were there. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Why would this also be important? Because Elisha had been there and watched when Elijah had been taken up in a fiery chariot. So it's the same kind of thing, like, ooh, God didn't just leave and stop that whole business with Elijah. Those same chariots of fire are here on my behalf as well for Elisha. See what I mean? Why do they put the name so close? As the enemy came down toward him, verse 18, Elisha prayed to the Lord, strike this army with blindness. So he struck them with blindness as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, this is not the road and this is not the city. Follow me. I'll lead you to the man you are looking for. And he led them to Samaria. After they entered the city, Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see. And then the Lord opened their eyes and they looked around and there they were inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, well, shall I kill them, my father? It wasn't his father, but his spiritual father, I guess. Shall I kill them? He led them into the enemy capital city, and now their eyes are open and they're like, guys? We're like in their capital city, standing here in the middle of the city, and now this is awkward moment. I love those awkward moments. It's like, the king goes, like, should I just kill them all right here now? I mean, is that what you want me to do with them? What, you're in charge here, obviously, Elisha. You and God are in charge here. No, I'm not. And he answers him, Elisha says, do not kill them. He answered, would you kill those who have captured, will you kill those you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. This whole shocking way to end the battle, instead of wiping out your enemy, just beat them, throw them a potluck, everyone in town, bring the food out, let them eat well. Be like taking them to the Nazarene church. Feed them! Just, you know, that's why they have these tables here permanently. Just feed them, and then send them home. And so they come back home. Can you imagine them coming back to the king and going, well, we were made blind, and then it turned out the guy we were trying to find, that prophet that always knows what's going on, he leads us into the middle of their capital city, and we all sit around, and then they fed us and treated us real nice, music and dancing, I'm sure, and then sent us home. I kind of wonder if the soldiers even told their king what really happened, because I kind of think that would be such a shocker. So then you get to verse 24. Sometime later. So time has passed. When they say sometime later in the Bible, that can mean months, years, a period of time. Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria. So how do I know it probably was years? Because he wouldn't have done this right away when they just fed his own soldiers and taken nice care of them. So later on down the road, this leader finally says, I've had enough of this. Let's destroy this rival of ours. King Jehoram of Israel, that's his capital. And so from the northern kingdom, let's just go take care of it. So verse 25. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels. That's about 2 pounds of silver. And a quarter of a cab of seed, which is about a fourth of a pound of seed pods, dove's dung. Okay, when they say seed pod, and they bring this up, they're actually talking about pigeon poop. No, dove poop, okay? Dove dung. We all got that? They would actually eat that. Because there's something in dove's dung that way they can eat seeds and, eat seeds and poop them out so you can reuse them. So that's what you got to have for dinner, honey. Dove's dung. Okay. About 2 ounces of that. And that's how bad the siege. So, yeah, don't ever complain about any recipe that your family makes because they could replace it with dove's dung. Okay. They would make these siege ramps. So I know we'd never get past the dung. Okay. They would bring dirt in outside the city walls. And as they bring the dirt in, pound it and add more dirt and can sneak up a little closer and add more dirt and then more dirt. And they would keep adding dirt until these ramps were built right up to the city, top of the city walls. So the enemy could just up instead of trying to get through the wall or knock the wall down. You just siege means you hold, and then they can't get out to go get supplies, but you're going to be able to get in. And that's what we've been going. So it takes a long period of time, sometimes working at night and throughout the days and bringing bucket by bucket of, they didn't have they didn't even have a little bobcat. They didn't have any of those backhoes. There was nothing there. This is all done by guys, bucket by bucket worth, to add this siege ramp. So it takes a long period of time. In that time, most of the time, dove droppings were used for fuel. They also were used, if you had to, as a substitute for salt. I'm not going to go out and test it and find out for you. I'm just saying that's what it says here in resource books. Verse 26, as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried to him, "Help me, my lord, the king. Help me, help me." The king replied, verse 27, "If the Lord does not help you, where can I get help for you?" He realized how bad things are. From the threshing floor? Can I get you help from the wine press? Yes. What's the matter? Like, look, we're all starving. This is terrible. We're in this horrible position. Oftentimes, this would have been a couple years worth of not enough food. So this is all going on, and she answers, "This woman," she points to some other lady, "this woman said to me, 'Give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son.' So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give up your son so we may eat him,' but she has hidden him." Does it just tell you how bad things have gotten? Not only so bad, but they would reduce the people low enough to eat your own children. When the king heard the women's words, verse 30, he tore his robes. I mean, it's not going to get worse than that. As he went along the wall, the people looked and they saw that under his robes, he had sackcloth on his body. So the king wasn't just sitting in the palace with all of his good stuff and doing fine. He was showing that sign of suffering along with his people. And he said, verse 31, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today." That's messed up. Because who's he blaming for all this? Elisha. Elisha must have been the one that messed this whole thing up. Why didn't he call on God to rescue us? Why does he? Oh, it doesn't matter that we've been worshiping other gods and we haven't been faithful to God. But somehow it's the prophet's fault. Verse 32, now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "Don't you see this murderer is sending someone to cut off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold it shut against him. Is not the sound of his master's footsteps behind him? While he was still talking to them, the messenger came down to him. The king said, "This disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" You see, we can't make it, not even one more day. So I'm going to take matters into my hands, and as the king, we'll just kill the prophet because he's not bringing any good word from God for us. So it's his fault, and it surely will help the whole situation if we kill off Elisha. I'm just going to take care of this. And we all think, that's dumb. I mean, what solution is that? But how many times do we wait, and God's timing is still waiting, and we're like, I'm going to take matters into my own hands, and I'm going to figure this out and do something. I'm going to do it myself. Trust me, it's probably not a good plan, because then you get to chapter 7. Elisha replied, "Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah," that's about 12 pounds of the finest flour. Oh, it's been years. The finest flour will sell for a shekel. That's 2/5 of an ounce. That would be like, it would be like a bag of flour will sell for a penny. And 2 seahs, about 20 pounds of barley for a shekel. You can get that for a dime at the gate of Samaria. Our hometown, here's our gate. We got siege ramps outside. It's been years. People are eating their own children because they're starving. This is how crazy things have gotten. And by tomorrow, didn't he say? By this time tomorrow, you can get the finest flour for a penny. You can get a giant thing of barley for making all your bread and all your stuff for a dime. The officer on whose arm, verse 2, the king was leaning, said to the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of heaven, could this happen?" "You will see it with your own eyes," answered Elisha, "but you won't eat any of it." Here's this little tidbit. The Hebrew word for officer, and it says the officer, one of his officers, usually it meant the third man in a chariot. The guy who held the shield. So one would drive the horse, one had the weapon, and a third guy would hold up the shield to protect them. It meant a high military official, someone who was really in charge. It could have been the head of their army. This is the guy, and he's like, "Okay, bucko, Elisha, I know this sounds great, and sounds like a really incredible, miracle, but even if heaven itself opened up and dumped that stuff into our town, could it happen by this time tomorrow? I don't think so." Huge doubt in Israel still that God can come through for them. Verse 3, "Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, 'Why stay here until we die? If we say, we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die.'" Now remember, leprosy made you stay outside the town because you were unclean. So they're outside the gate. They're watching the whole siege ram thing. They're not bothered by anyone because, you want to go touch a leper? No. So the enemy's not bothering them, really. And the city people don't care that they're outside the city because they don't want him in with them. So here they are in this situation. If they go in the city, they're going to die from the famine like everybody else. And if we stay here, we're going to die because the enemy is getting closer to taking the city and they'll just kill us too. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and just surrender to them. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, well, then we die. So they're going to go anyway. So here's this whole situation, not good and bad that they've got. So verse 5, "At dusk they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army. So they said to one another, look, the king of Israel's hired the Hittite and the Egyptian kings to attack us. So they got up and they fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. Can you picture this? They're hearing this huge army coming at them. It's like, and they just run. They leave everything. Verse 8. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp. They entered one of the tents and they ate and drank. Woo! They've got sandwiches out here. They got food. They got beverage. They got everything. So then they took the silver, the gold, the clothes, and they went off and they hid them. Then they returned and entered another tent and took some things from it, and they hid them also. And then they said to each other, you know, it's that whole niggling inside of you that starts going like, oh, what we're doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. And if we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. They were outcasts. They had to try to struggle to survive every single day. They're getting overwhelmed with all the food, all the clothes, all the money, all the wealth, all the animals, everything they would ever need in life, just sitting ready for the taking. And they're at that spot. But then they also knew that, you know, we're kind of held responsible for knowing where riches come from. Just let that sink in for a minute. We know where all of our riches really come from.
That's right.
And there are people around us, I don't care how they look, whether it's a street person or whether it's the person in city official. They have spiritual loss, and we know where the answer is. Father, would you take our hearts and remind us that we've got to share with them the good news. You see, we've come into the camp, God. We know that you are protecting us and guiding us, and you are taking care of us, and all of that. And there are people around us spiritually starving to death, willing to eat their own children. Some of them so spiritually hungry, they're willing to take their own life. And we have truth. Help us not keep it to ourselves, but share it with others, I ask. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll put a marker there. We'll pick it up next week when we come back. Don't forget that thing you can sign if you went to is back there if you haven't. Make sure you check the in the back and help yourself to Dill.
You need more, I got some.
Minnie's got tons. She will fill you with dill. And it's great having you with us today. Have a good rest of it. Bye.